Most people think financial planning is calculators and spreadsheets, but there's more to it than that. So this week, let's talk about our feelings. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Phil and I as we talk investing, finance, and retirement. And Phil, should we sing, a little Barbra Streisand feeling?
Yeah, you don't want me singing, but
do they belong in retirement planning, right? How can they not?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
exactly. we're emotional creatures, whether it's a good emotion or not. They still rule us a lot of times, right? So we'll talk about a few ways that, look, they're going to be there, right? So how do you kind of manage it? How do you kind of deal with it? Maybe you can separate some of it with X's and O's. Maybe you can't, or maybe they help the feelings when you got the X's and O's, right? So,
right. Yeah. I mean, we all have, to your point, the emotions, and I mean, that controls a lot of our decisions, but it's a matter of understanding that up front. I mean, that's the first step in it is realizing that,
that you have a problem.
Well, you have a problem, but that's who we are, right?
Right.
I mean, some people are more emotional than others about finances.
Yeah.
And maybe even in a married couple, that's very
sure.
common to have one person that's more emotional than somebody else in that couple.
Very true.
Yep.
I mean, maybe that was just projecting on myself. First step is admitting I have a problem with my cheeseburger addiction. I don't know.
That's right.
Yeah, cheeseburgers
you
are fantastic.
Admit you got a problem first.
That's right. Exactly. All right. Well, let's jump through a few of these and we'll talk about some stuff. So, let's kind of start from the aspect of getting into retirement and thinking about how life has changed for you. Where do you want to live? Where and how do you want to live, right? And typically the grandkids are kind of the piece that alters this equation.
It does, yeah. Sometimes, at least, and again, this is where it can be maybe for one party in the couple, maybe the wife, right? She definitely wants to be next to the grandkids. Not that the men don't, the husbands don't, but it might be higher up the priority list, let's say.
Right.
So, so I mean, that plays into it often, when you talk about where do you live in retirement, let's say the grandkids and no one's moved away, but, now you're making the decision of, okay, do we sell the house? And maybe one party in the couple is looking at it more financially and, kind of methodically saying, okay, well, yeah, we need a, one story, don't need the house that we have this size of a house anymore. So all these different things are pointing to let's downsize and move to maybe a smaller house, a ranch.
Right.
And some, the other party's like, well, but this is where we raised all our kids. There's so much history here. Do we want to give that up?
Well, and the math then maybe comes into conversation here because, as we know, housing prices are crazy. So maybe you're not getting maybe you're getting lots for the place you sell, but you're not getting that much for the price you're paying for the new digs. And so running that math could maybe help with those feelings, because then you go, well, all right, feelings are one thing, but money talks when it comes to this much of a difference, and maybe it just doesn't make mathematical sense to move.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you've got to understand both sides of that equation. And when I'm talking to clients on this, I always refer to them, there's the head rule and the tummy rule, so to speak, right? I mean, the head rule, that's the math. And I can give you that. I can tell you all the math behind it and run the numbers to show you mathematically, economically, financially, this is what makes the most sense.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the tummy rule is the one that governs, right? It's got to be something that you're comfortable with. So,
but at least when you have that, now you can make that decision. The tummy rule now has a little more weight to it because you've taken into account some of the head rule, hopefully.
Well, right. You've gone into that, I'm going to say eyes wide open, so to speak, right? You've got all the information and realizing, financially, it's probably better off if we do this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm more comfortable with this, and I'm okay with the what I'm giving up, so to speak, financially to do that.
Yeah.
So as long as you know that, then personally, my job as a financial advisor is done for that, because
you check that box.
Right. I mean, I've provided you the information to make that informed decision. And that's really my role as the financial advisor working with my clients, isn't to make these decisions for them. It's their life financially.
Yeah. All right.
My role is to give them the information so that as they're making that, they have those decisions. They have kind of both sides of the equation. So,
yeah. Well, so since we're in, the Motor City, since you're in the Motor City there, I'll use my analogy for the next one. Do you like to get into the nitty gritty, or do you just want the overview? So do you want to know how the combustion engine works and being able to take it apart and put it back together? Or do you just want to know how to drive the car? Right.
Right.
And so there's two kinds of people out there, multiple kinds of people. But obviously, when you're dealing with that, that's an emotional factor. Somebody may come into you and say, all right, Phil, how deep in the weeds can we get? I want to know it all. Right. And then there's somebody that say, nah, just keep me up here. So how do you work that?
Yeah. And that's, again, my job as a financial advisor is understanding clients because everyone's a little different. I mean, we work with a lot of engineers. And not all engineers are get me into the nitty gritty, but some of them are,
right.
You know, and some of them are upfront. They want to know that, you know, at least I think,
right.
You know, how does this work?
Right.
And if you can explain satisfactory and get into the nitty gritty of here's how the process works and why, and, you know, all the math behind it, so to speak, then they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And if that's what it takes to make somebody comfortable, that's fine. You know, but then on the other hand, I don't want to go through all that for somebody that doesn't really care. Because to them, it just is noise and it's going to be overwhelming and then they're going to be confused.
Oh, they're tuning out too. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if they just want to know, hey, look, am I going to be okay? Can I, you know, continue to live the retirement lifestyle that I've been accustomed to?
Right.
Good. Then we're done. That's fine.
And that's part of that learning process you go through, right? When you're onboarding people to find out, hey, do I need to give them that higher level overview because that's what they want? Or do I need to get down and dirty on the weeds, right? So,
yeah. And that's, again, my job as a financial advisor is understanding my clients because everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know, there are some that still like to know kind of the ins and outs and they want to see all the intricacies of how does this work and why. And others are just like, hey, are we still okay? And, you know, what are we doing? Okay, we're doing a lot of Roth conversion planning right now. And this comes up with a lot of clients where they want to see, okay, the math and here's the return and results and you got to pay this much more and this is why and go through all that. Others are like, okay, we're still doing conversions. What's the bottom line?
Right,
you know, and this is why, and it makes sense still. Yep. Okay, then we're good.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of the Tax Smart Retiree right now.
Okay. All right. What about the emotion of to be in debt or to not to be in debt, right? You know, in retirement. Because some people are petrified of walking into retirement having any debt, and some are cool with it, right? So again, you got to work those nuances.
Yeah, and this again comes back to the head rule, tummy rule. You know, I work this discussion with a lot of clients that are approaching retirement, you know, and have maybe that more traditional approach of, hey, I want to get the house paid off. And I understand it. You know, it's if I don't have the mortgage payment, it's, you know, X amount less that I have to worry about. Where is it going to come from in retirement? But I mean, the reality of it financially, again, the math, the head rule side of it, when you start to run the math, if you've got a mortgage that you're only paying 2% on, you know, 3% maybe, it doesn't really make sense to take something out of, especially if it's like out of an IRA, you know, where now you're having to pay taxes to pay this off quicker, then maybe it puts you in a higher bracket. You know, you potentially have higher upside potential in that IRA. I mean, so there's all these factors you have to consider.
Right.
But again, my job as the advisor is to let them know, here's the options, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Personally, I wouldn't recommend doing it, let's say, because X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, if you want to do it, then let's talk about what the right process is to do that, the most feasible, you know, from a tax standpoint, et cetera. So.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, and again, you know, to try and kid ourselves into saying that, well, our emotions are not going to carry too much weight into this is illogical. Now, your financial advisor can be a lot more emotionally detached because they're providing you with the data, and you can kind of sort of work that amongst yourselves as the client, as the end user, and certainly volatility in the stock market, volatility in general, but certainly volatility in the stock market is a big emotional factor for us all because we all want to catch as much money as we can on the way up, but nobody, you know, wants any of it on the way down. And right now, Phil, I mean, you know, we're walking out of October into November at the time we're taping this. And it's been pretty darn hot. Been pretty on fire here last little bit with a lot of AI driving stuff. And it's funny, at the time we're talking, I just saw this headline, these two different contradictory headlines, excuse me, earlier. It says, "Will the S&P hit 7,500?" And it's like before Christmas. And then the other one said, "Will it hit 7,500 or will it hit 7,000 and then crater?" Right. So you have these two, like one very positive, one very negative. And so again, you're riding the emotion train.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, things like this, the amount of information that's available today, and opinions, to your point, right?
Yeah.
There's all these varying opinions that, from an emotional standpoint, can be very troublesome.
Sure.
If you're the type of person that likes to do research, so to speak,
Yeah,
you're looking online, and you're listening to this person and then that person, and everyone's saying these different things, and you're like, just take me out, I'm done.
Yeah, you're getting pushed and pulled.
Right. You don't know the kind of the noise that's out there. So again, that's as an advisor, my job is helping to understand that, right? To kind of walk you through that and say, hey, there is a potential risk, absolutely, in investing, but this is how we have you positioned to hedge that.
Yeah.
And kind of walk you through that, walk you off the cliff, so to speak, so that, again, we don't want you making a decision that's emotionally charged just based on that, right?
Sure,
If at the end of the discussion you're still uncomfortable and you still want to make a change, let's do it. Because you have to be able to sleep at night.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And if you can't sleep at night, then we've got to change something to make it work for you. But my job is to make sure you understand, again, back to the pros and cons.
Yeah, and that kind of falls in line with the how do you feel about the spending or a budget, right? Like those kind of go in together. Hey, I need to see X amount of dollars in my cash emergency fund in the bank, kind of thing, so I can sleep, right? So that's a huge emotional response, and that kind of maybe ties into the spending. I was talking with somebody not long ago, Phil, and they were saying, the wife was walking into the retirement strategy saying, I just don't understand how this is going to work. I need to know these checks are coming in so that I feel comfortable. And once she started to see it and experience it, she got groovy, right? But it took her a little bit because her emotions were firing up about, well, how do we spend? How do we go buy groceries and do all the normal stuff when he doesn't work anymore, kind of thing.
Hey, your paycheck's been deposited, once a month or 2 weeks or whatever it is. How is this going to work?
Yeah.
And that's perfectly normal. Bring that up. And to me, things like that are important to understand.
Yeah.
Right. And I always tell my clients, don't hold that in and not tell me.
For sure.
Because then it becomes this nervous, crazy, I don't know how this is going to work. And you're building it up to something that at the end of the day might be nothing. It's, well, here, this is how it works.
Right.
So if that's a concern, anything like that is a concern, don't not talk to your advisor about it because you think, oh, that's just silly. It's, talk to them. Or her, to make sure they understand where you're coming from. Because if we don't know, we're not going to be able to answer and help you walk through that. And that's my job in the advisory role. Isn't just the finances. It's to understand that you are this emotional being and you're going to have these decisions and reactions and help you kind of walk through that logically.
Right. Yeah.
And I can walk through it in a detached sense because it's not my money.
Right.
And I've been through this many, many times, so I know the process. So I can give you that kind of second voice to sound things off, to give you the confidence, hopefully, to make this transition a little bit easier.
Yeah, so, and that's where that strategy and that black and white,
yes,
documents come into play, because then you're like, okay, well, I can see it right here, but we can also call Phil up and say, all right, hey, I'm a little worried about this, or I'm feeling this, or I'm emotional about that. Can we come in for a consultation, or can we get on a Zoom call and run some math, or whatever the case is. And I'll tie these last two together, Phil, because they kind of work together. It's really around the legacy, conversation, your feelings about legacy. Maybe that's charitable giving. Maybe you don't have kids. Maybe that's what you're going to do with the money when you pass. Maybe you do have, a smaller family and you want to give some. Maybe you just want to give some in general, or whatever, right? I mean, whatever you want your legacy to look like, leaving it all to the kids, leaving more or less. Again, those are all feelings that kind of tie back into, and that stuff you got to share with your advisor up front. So when you're building out that plan, you can say, okay, look, the missus wants to leave a bigger chunk to the family. I want to spend it more. Phil, how can you help us find this common ground?
Right. And again, so I mean, putting on my
marriage counselor
hat or some marriage counselor hat or whatever, I mean, it's bringing that up because very often you've got the husband and wife have different opinions.
Yeah.
Case in point, I was working with a client just this week that, I mean, they've got more than enough to make it through retirement. Everything's going to be fine.
Okay.
He's still kind of worried but he's got the mindset of we might run out. And it's like, look, you're not going to run out. You'd have to spend so much more than what you're spending to run out.
Okay.
And she's like, why don't we help the kids with they're sending their grandkids to private school? She'd love to be able to do that. And he's like, oh, we can't do that because we might run out.
Gotcha.
And it's trying to help the two of them come together to realize these are your opinions. And, this is the reality, right? The wife wants to do this. The husband is concerned. So let me help at least maybe bring the math in and show, well, here's what happens if you do that. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So you don't leave as much at the end, but that's ultimately at the end of the day, it's coming down to making decisions are you going to spend it now or are you going to leave it?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great piece of that too, Phil, is really the taxation side of that conversation, right?
Yep.
Because then people are saying, well, I want to, the question comes up, I want to leave more now and watch them enjoy it. How can we do that versus once we're gone? And yes, there's some tax differences by doing when you're gone by, leaving things to people because of the step up in basis and so on and so forth. So you gotta do some of the tax strategy planning as well while you're doing all this planning. So then that helps you inform that decision of, do we give some now while we can watch them, or do we just truly leave it until once we're gone? Right. So that all factors in.
Yeah. And that's where, again, my job is to help, I don't want to say pull, but gather that information from both parties, husband and wife.
Yeah.
What do you really want to do? What do you, don't worry about the ins and outs and how it's going to work. First discussion, just, hey, if you wanted to, everything's going to be fine. You've got more than enough. If you had the perfect picture of how this would play out, what does that look like? Let's talk about that first. Now that we understand that, well, let's talk about the reality of if we're going to make that happen, well, this is how we do it.
Yeah. Okay.
And here's some pros and cons. But don't build that into up front that, I don't think we can do that.
Right.
Well, you don't know. Let's, let that be a discussion we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I can help you walk through that because maybe you can, and if there was a way for you to be able to do that, maybe it costs a little bit more in taxes but at the end of the day, as long as you know that and you're willing to do that, then do it because that's what you really want to do. And that's what's going to bring you enjoyment in retirement and fulfillment. So
at the end of the day, do your feelings belong in your retirement plan? Yeah, because they're gonna be, right?
I mean, they're going to be whether you want them to be or not.
So whether they belong or don't belong, it's going to be there, right? So get a strategy, get a plan, and be honest with not only your advisor but your partner and yourself, because that's going to help you dial in the plan that you really want versus, skirting around the issue. And we all kind of do that in lots of stages in life. It's a normal human thing, but, try to be as forthright as you can so that you can get the plan and get the design that you need and make those adjustments along the way. So as always, you got questions, need help, reach out to Phil. We got the information in the show notes below. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube, and then click on those links below. And if you need some help, we got a cool little video here you can check out as well on how to get started. But with that, we'll say goodbye. We'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. See you, buddy.
Take care.
Phil? Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.